depends on how you answer the question, how loved and supported do I feel in my life right now? And that tells us more about your health 20 years down the road than any other factor. The truth of the matter is, we have to start changing the systems. We have to start changing the structures. And one of the most important systems and structures that we can start to change is in the workplace. Because the workplace is where we spend the bulk of our time. And so if we are feeling lonely in the workplace, if we are not feeling supported in the workplace, there is nothing we can do by walking home and getting home and being and recovering from that in the few hours we have every evening off the hamster wheel and the few hours on the weekends that we have when we're not doing chores, kids, exercise, family obligations, and all the other stuff. The workplace is where we have to solve this. And then, of course, this one is if you have a best friend at work, and unfortunately, not enough of us do, the research is showing. But if you have somebody at work that you would actually call a best friend, you are 7 times more engaged in your job. What company would not want you to have a best friend at work if they saw those numbers? We are better at engaging customers. We produce higher quality of work. We experience higher personal well-being. We're less likely to be injured on the job. I was brought into a construction firm company to talk about this, and I was 500 men in the audience, all construction workers and engineers, and the president said, I want less injuries on the job, and I read that this is the thing that makes the biggest difference. And so talk about visionary leadership, saying, let's look at this. We call in sick less when it's our friend that was going to be having to take our place at work, when it's affecting them. Having friendships at work matters so much. Relationships. Most of us, our loneliness is not coming because we don't know enough people. Most of us, our loneliness is coming because we don't feel known by a few. For most of us, it is not a matter that we need to go networking more. For most of us, it's that we don't know if the net we've built is supporting us. So we want to make sure we're building that net. And so what I want to do today is talk about how to do this, how to build greater relationships in our life. And we're going to do this where you think about it for your own life, but also as I go into companies and talk about this just from a teamwork perspective or a team culture perspective. And so we can touch on some of that, what you can do in the workplace too. Loneliness, this is one of the big studies that was done by Brigham Young University. They took 148 studies, longitudinal studies, and they have found and concluded that if you feel lonely and don't do something about it, it is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Twice as harmful as being obese. It does the same damage on your body as being a lifelong alcoholic, and it's worse than not exercising. By definition, a friendship has to have these 3 things. And I'm going to teach how to do these 3 things in what I call the Friendtimacy formula. And so if we can take these 3 things and say, by definition, if we then know that these are the 3 things that build healthy relationships across the board, then we don't have to leave this up to just be like, well, I hope we like each other, and just kind of be like, well, I'll just tell a few funny jokes and we'll be friends. Or we don't have to just like hope that we're friends. Like this is our definition that I can guarantee you have never built a friendship in your life that feels good without having done these 3 things. You may not have known them, but you did it intuitively. You'll be able to look back on every relationship in your life and say, oh yeah, that's why it's working. And conversely, any relationship in your life that does not feel good, it is because at least one of these 3 things is in lack. This goes with your colleagues, your boss, your husbands, your wives, your not yet husbands and wives, your kids. Any relationship in your life, we can look at these 3 things and assess the health of this relationship. I can look at the 3 things on paper and actually be able to determine the closeness you have of a relationship based upon these 3 things to that. Yeah, some of you have heard the famous rat study where they used it kind of inaccurately to say, see, this is why cocaine is so addictive, because if you put cocaine in the water bottle of a rat, they just keep going back to it, and pretty soon they're like addicted and hooked on drugs. The study, however, the opposite of that, actually showed rats having cocaine water access, but when they had toys and friends in their cage with them, they went and tasted the cocaine water, but they did not get addicted because they actually played, and they were so busy playing with everybody that they did not choose to keep going back to that water. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. I mean, you get the idea. We need to put momentum into these relationships if we want to get the payoff. It's a little bit like exercise. You can't just go once or twice and be like, well, that's a big joke. It hasn't worked at all. You have to go consistently, and you don't really get the payoff until you've logged a lot of hours, right? It's not like, this is so much fun. You get the effect after you've logged many of the hours. The consistency one is important because the goal of consistency is building trust. This is where the safety comes in. Remember, the definition of all healthy friendships are any relationship between any two people where we both feel seen in a safe and satisfying way. This is where the safety happens, because it's only as we have consistent time together that we can start predicting how you're going to behave, and that's what creates safety. To our third requirement of all healthy relationships. Because if you just have the first two, if you just have positivity and consistency, it feels good and you see them frequently, that's called a social group. This is how we've socialized most men to do friendships. Unfortunately, truly, we have a huge loneliness epidemic. I love speaking to men's audiences. The need is so huge because we have not taught, modeled, encouraged, or given permission to do vulnerability for our men. And for women, we haven't necessarily done this super well always. And I know that is not the message you want to hear, but most of us are lonely because we just keep wanting somebody to ring our doorbell and announce themselves as our best friend, and we just love each other already. And yet, wouldn't that be kind of creepy if that did happen? Yeah, it happened. And so the rule of thumb is that as your consistency goes up, so should your vulnerability match it. So be mindful that your vulnerability is never, some of you are at risk of skyrocketing the vulnerability and thinking that's going to help you feel closer sooner. And you might feel closer sooner, but the other person might feel dragged to death and be kind of pulling away because they don't want to get pulled back in, so be mindful of that. And some of us, we might be knowing people over and over and over, and we need to start showing up more and actually letting ourselves be revealed to match the level of relationship we have built with people. And I teach these extensively and have a lot of videos on YouTube on each one of these specifically. If you want to talk about vulnerability deeper or consistency, I do a lot of stuff, and so a lot of that's available. But I just wanted to highlight for you how it worked. So in your head, you could be mindful and recognize that only a few relationships are going to make it to the top, right? You can't be that consistent and that vulnerable with that many people. Like, we know people. We have friends. But we wonder if we feel really known. Like, are they there? Do they see me? And he said, I wish I could just do friendship like women, where one of these guys would just say, come on, dude, I'm going to take you out. Let's just go sit in a restaurant and order a meal and talk. He's like, men don't do that, do we? And I was like, you could. He's like, but we don't. And I was like, but you could. I was like, in other countries, they do. This is not a male-female issue. Friendship is not a gender issue. Friendship is a human issue. And in other countries, men actually do these 3 requirements better than women. In our country, and in some other Western countries, we have done a huge disservice to our boys and to our men and not expecting this to be the normal part of their lives, and we need to be changing that. We absolutely do. And many of us are working for men and with men who are some of the loneliest people around us. And there's a stereotype and a belief out there that it's lonely at the top, and they're extra feeling isolated. We can do such a ministry in our spaces and in our spaces and our circles, in our homes, in our companies, in our offices, helping make sure that the men and women around us, that we can create events and thoughtfulness and intention around how we can increase positivity, consistency, and vulnerability. I want none of us to say, I don't know if I have friends. I said to him, my guess is that you do. My guess is that you just don't have practice yet talking about these things, but my guess is that your friends would totally show up in this space for you. And it might take a little practice, and it might feel a little awkward, but you have to do it. You have to say, can I take you out for lunch? I've got some things I want. I need your support. And you have to do it. And my invitation to you is the same. It is going to feel a little awkward. You can't just keep doing the same thing you've been doing, which is familiar and comfortable, and expect different results. You can't stay in your comfort zone and get connected. You can't just keep saying, I'm too tired, and expect your life to start building more intimacy in it. We have to change what we're doing. We have to show up differently. And I need you in those workplaces and in your homes to help teach this. I need you being an advocate for this. I need you influencing this. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in the movement to help end loneliness wherever you are, in whatever circles you are in? I ask that of you today.